Spider-Man No Way Home is the third installment in the Spider-Man Home trilogy and the 27th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was directed by John Watts and stars Tom Holland, Zendaya, Jacob Batalon, Benedict Cumberbatch, Marisa Tomei, and quite a few others. I wanted to give everybody a chance to see this movie. This review will include spoilers for not just this movie, but basically all of the Marvel movies. You've been warned. That being said, let's dive into the good. This movie is probably Tom Holland's best performance as Peter Parker. He perfectly conveys all of the emotions that Peter goes through in this movie. This movie also probably gives Peter the biggest emotional journey he's gone through so far in the MCU. Despite the movie's numerous plot lines and characters, it never feels overstuffed or crowded. It perfectly balances all of the plot lines and character arcs. The chemistry between Holland, Zendaya, and Batalon is perfect. Since Holland is getting another trilogy of movies, I hope that the next set of movies keeps this trio together. This movie definitely relies quite a bit on the pleasure of recognition, but I don't mind that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that Charlie Cox's Daredevil is utilized pretty perfectly. He doesn't overshadow the Spider-Men and manages to canonize the Netflix MCU. There were a few memes incorporated into the movie which were kind of silly, but also a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Peter's main motivation in this movie. The way that he goes out of his way to help these villains and doesn't give up on them is so Peter Parker. There's also quite a few fun set pieces and interactions. The Peter versus Doctor Strange fight was very fun and innovative. I also really enjoyed the banter between the villains. There's a scene between Sandman and Electro where they talk about their origin stories, and I found that much more engaging than I thought I would. Willem Dafoe gives debatably the best villain performance in this entire franchise. I also really like the way that this movie characterizes Norman Osborn as much more sympathetic than in his previous movie appearance. I also really appreciate that this movie lets Aunt May's death sink in. It doesn't ruin it with a joke, and it takes the time to show how Peter and Happy react. Of course, the scene where Toby and Andrew enter is fantastic.
Oh! Hi. Hi. No, it's okay. I'm a nice guy.
It was everything that fans have wanted for literally years now. I really love Toby's characterization in this movie. He feels like an older, wiser, more mature version of his character.
Wait, so you're Spider-Man too? Why didn't you just say that?
I generally don't go around advertising it. Kind of defeats the whole anonymous superhero thing.
And Andrew Garfield gives debatably his best performance as Spider-Man. He conveys so much emotion in only a couple minutes of screen time. It's truly amazing. I love the scene where all three Peter Parkers work on cures for the bad guys. I love that we don't just get to see them be Spider-Man together, but also get to see them do geeky Peter Parker stuff together. I love how intrigued Tom and Andrew were that Toby can shoot webs out of his body. It's something that's been discussed so much by fans, and it's cool to see the movies acknowledge it. Perhaps my favorite moment in the movie is when Andrew saves Zendaya. I love that this movie gave him that little bit of a redemption arc. I also like that this movie didn't undo Doc Ock's arc in Spider-Man 2. Instead, this movie gives him his own little mini arc, and he actually helps the Peters take out the other villains towards the end. One of the best things about this movie is how it emphasizes an essential Spider-Man characteristic that the previous movies in this home trilogy haven't really touched on: consequences to Peter's actions. There are no shortage of superhero origin stories that involve the death of a parent or a loved one. It's arguably the biggest cliche in the superhero genre, regardless of medium. However, what makes Spider-Man's origin story so distinct is that the death of Uncle Ben was caused, albeit somewhat indirectly, by a choice he made. This moment from the original comic laid the foundation for what would become a fundamental aspect of Peter Parker's character. His decisions have negative consequences that he has to fix. Previous Spider-Man movies have doubled down on this by having Peter make a decision that seems good at first but has unforeseen repercussions. For example, in Spider-Man 2, Peter makes the decision to stop being Spider-Man. This decision causes him to lose his powers. For a while, everything goes great. His grades are better, he makes more money at work, etc. However, because he lost his powers, he wasn't able to save the man in the burning building. This movie gets that characteristic right. Peter tries to do the right thing, help Ned and MJ get into college, but this has negative results. Several villains from other universes are brought into this one. He tries to help these villains by curing them, but this leads to the death of Aunt May. All that being said, let's get into the mixed. The second half of this movie is much stronger than the first. The first half isn't bad, but it is sloppy and a little bit clunky. There are some plot points that are a little bit contrived. For example, the reason why Peter goes to the bridge where he eventually meets Doc Ock could have been better. The reason why Peter asked Doctor Strange to do the spell in the first place could have been more solid. Michael Giacchino's score is okay. I like the various renditions he does of Holland's Spider-Man theme. I like the track Sling vs. Bling because it incorporates Doctor Strange's leitmotif, also written by Giacchino. I also have a soft spot for Shield of Pain because it brings back Toby'S theme from his movies. I also feel like Aunt May's death maybe could have had a little more impact, just because out of the 3 renditions of Aunt May we've had so far, or I guess 4 technically, I feel like this one is the least developed. I wish we had gotten more time to know this Aunt May. Andrew went all in with his performance, but Toby feels like he's holding back just a little bit. When Norman stabbed Toby, my entire theater gasped. Now, I like that Toby didn't die, but I kinda wish they hadn't have done the fake out. The Doctor Strange 2 trailer at the end of the credits was okay. I like that they seem to be going in a darker direction, but hope that the movie fully commits to that. Finally, let's get into the bad. Most of my negatives come from Jon Watts' directing. While I've never thought of him as a bad director per se, his movies don't have a strong visual style that make them stand out. As such, I wish there were more distinct visual moments. For example, there's not really a lot of heroic shots of all 3 Spider-Men. There's a moment where all 3 Spider-Man run and jump off the Statue of Liberty, and I thought it would have been the perfect opportunity for a hero shot of them jumping together. But no. Another example would be at the end of the film when Peter gets a new suit. There's no clear shot where the audience can clearly see Peter's new suit. Also, while I get this movie was made during a pandemic, there's really some not so great green screen. There are times when characters are having a conversation and it doesn't feel like they're looking at or really talking to each other. I assumed that they wanted to avoid leaks, so they shot a lot of scenes separately and then edited them together in post. However, they didn't splice the footage together as well as they could have. Doctor Strange's personality in this movie also seems to be a little bit inconsistent. At first, he seems relaxed and even banters with Peter.
I'm sorry to bother you, sir.
Please, we saved half the universe together. I think we're beyond you calling me sir.
Okay, Steven.
That feels weird, but I'll allow it.
Next, it seems that his egotistical side has returned, and seems that his desire to prove himself is what motivates him to try the spell. Next, he yells at Peter for being impulsive, even though Strange acted just as impulsively as Peter did. Some of the bad guys' motivations aren't very well fleshed out. I get why Green Goblin and Electro would want to stay in the MCU universe, but why would Lizard or Sandman? They seem to all kind of team up at the end for no real reason. I also feel that the Venom stuff wasn't really handled very well. If Doctor Strange's spell only pulled in people who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, why did Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock get pulled into this universe? Also, I don't like that the Venom 2 post-credit scene teased a meetup between Eddie and Peter, and then that didn't happen in this movie. I get that it's probably going to set up Agent Venom, but it still is a bit disappointing. There's also some holes in this movie's kind of lore or world building. Doctor Strange tells Peter that all of these villains died fighting Spider-Man, but the Sandman and the Lizard didn't die. Finally, I never thought I'd say this about a Disney movie, but you can really feel this movie's budget at times. We barely get to see Flint Marko or Kirk Connors in their human form. I assume this is because it was cheaper to have Thomas Hayden Church and Rhys Ifans go into a studio and record some lines and then have a body double play their characters in their CGI forms than it was to actually have those 2 actors on set. So all in all, despite a few small flaws, Spider-Man No Way Home is an epic conclusion to this first trilogy. Yes, there is a lot of fan service, but it's all done in ways that favor the storyline and characters. I think this movie is definitely my favorite of the Tom Holland trilogy. I'm gonna give it a very positive review. So that's it, that's my review. Tell me in the comments below, what did you guys think? Was this movie an epic conclusion to the Home trilogy, or was it just mindless fan service? Whatever you thought, let me know. If you want to see more Marvel content, check out this playlist, or maybe it's here, I can never remember. Thank you, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Consider clicking that subscribe button. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year.